Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Shearer. I'm the president of the Albany Public Library Board of Trustees, and I call our April board meeting to order. First item on the agenda is roll call. If trustees can just go around and introduce themselves. Again, my name is Sarah Shearer. I'm the president of the board.
Hi, Dr. Brenda Robinson, Vice President of the board.
I'm Tom McCarthy, Vice President for Finance.
Donna Patera, Secretary.
Arlene Way, Chair of the Nominating Committee and a representative to the Upper Hudson Library System.
Sarah Dallas, Trustee.
Brigitte Pryor is excused tonight.
Donna Dixon, Trustee.
And Jare, I think you were muted.
Jare Goins, Trustee.
And would our staff and appointees also like to introduce themselves?
Ron Smith, Board Treasurer.
Melanie Metzger, Interim Director.
Adam Stump, Director of Finance.
We'll skip over that next one, and then Robert Schofield, Counsel.
Thank you, everybody. Is there any public comment?
So there is one public comment. Bring that up a moment. So this was from Jonathan Skinner for the Book Review Committee of the Friends and Foundation of Albany Public Library, and a resident of Albany. He says, "Dear board members, I'm advised that attendance at the book talk sponsored by the Friends and Foundation of the Albany Public Library is at present limited to residents of Albany City as part of the Board of Trustees emergency rules for dealing with the COVID pandemic. Would it be possible to drop this rule now that the pandemic has eased a lot and much more is known about the virus? The case and other data are actually at the county level, so an intermediate step would be to allow residents of Albany County to participate, though we would very much like to drop any residency requirement. We at the FAPL would like to resume our in-person events as soon as we can safely do so, noting that the mask mandate for entering libraries has been dropped." And Sarah, would you like me to speak upon that?
Yes, thank
Briefly.
you. Just for everyone, typically we accept comments. So we don't usually comment on them at the meeting. We did receive this one in advance and we talked about it, and we thought it would be a good idea to answer this one during our meeting. Thank you, Melanie.
So as we are allowing with the COVID restrictions, with most of our programming, we had limited space for any in-person programming due to social distancing regulations. So we thought it was only fair, since we had to limit our attendance so drastically, that it would be best to allow for Albany City residents to attend at the time being for our in-person programming. As everybody remembers, we kind of just started in-person programming in April because a lot of our programs have to be planned out months in advance. So what we decided as a staff is, for the month of April, let us get our footings and our bearings back for in-person programming. Let us make sure everything is working smoothly with all of our in-person programs, and we're expecting to lift all restrictions come May. So as long as we still remain in the low numbers as of May, we will drop the residency requirement for in-person programming.
Thank you, Melanie. Do we have to put information about how to make a public comment?
I can do that really quick. 1 minute. Excuse me while I switch between screens here. Multiple roles tonight. So as a reminder to everybody, we do accept public comment for these meetings, the virtual meetings, via email or by phone. You can be reached at public comment at albanypubliclibrary.org. That is PUBLICCOMMENT at albanypubliclibrary.org, all one word. Or you can leave a message at 518-290-6905. That line is monitored. We do ask that you leave your name and address as a City of Albany resident, and they will be read out during the public comment sessions. There's 2 sessions of public comment, one at the beginning of the meeting and one at the end for our monthly meetings. And just as a reminder for at committee meetings, those are only read at the beginning of those meetings.
Thank you, Melanie. Moving on, we are on the consent agenda.
And as a note, Bob had mentioned that there were a couple of corrections that needed to be made to the minutes. So they were made this morning, so that what you are seeing on board docs are the updated minutes. Bob, was my explanation of the resolutions, does that suffice for you? Oh, you're muted.
It is what it is, Mel. It would be better if we have minutes that refer to resolutions, that they actually get posted with them. But if we can't figure out how to do that, we'll have to keep working on it.
Okay.
What we could do is just put the body of the resolution in the minutes,
Okay.
but we don't have to solve it today.
The explanation I had provided to Bob, because he had mentioned that that resolution should be included in the minutes, is that with board docs for the monthly board meetings, the minutes are auto-generated or generated as background as part of board docs. So we link, that's why it's a link and it's not an actual physical document. And so that's why they weren't included, but they are there because they're on last month's meeting.
Mel, would it be as simple as just putting them on that same page?
It won't allow me to.
So even where there's public comment, you can't just put a PDF on that page?
You can't put the PDF. I would have to cut and paste, because I attempted to do the PDF because it's on, because if you look in board docs where if you look at the agenda page, there's agenda and there's edit minutes, and it doesn't allow you to add files. It only allows you to edit the document, and that's what it's linking to.
And just when on the public facing side, it looks like all the other pages.
Right, but and that's what I said. It's strictly the minutes are connected via the process.
Yeah.
That's kind of weird.
So that's something we can work on. But with that, would anybody like to make a motion on the consent agenda?
I'd like to make a motion.
Dr. Robinson makes a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Tom, thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I believe tonight, are we roll call voting, Melanie?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I will just go down the roster and call everyone's name. Myself, I. Dr. Robinson?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Jenna?
Aye.
Arlene?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Jarre?
Yes.
And Donna?
Present.
Thank you. Motion carries. Next is finance. Sean and Adam.
Hello. The reports this month cover February of 2022, which is 67% of the way through the 21-22 fiscal year. The overall expenditures as of the end of February represent 65% of our modified budget. Payroll and the related costs are continuing to trend under budget, while our occupancy costs are continuing to trend over budget. The overall revenue as of the end of February represents 69% of our modified budget. There was activity in the capital fund during February that was related to the Washington Ave mechanical room upgrades. So I'll let Adam fill in some details.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Just a couple of brief notes this month. Energy supply rates remained higher than average in February, but were still lower than January's rates. The refund of annual bank fees that was mentioned last month is shown on this month's report. And contracts covering the first 6 months of 2022 were expensed during February, hence the higher than average current month maintenance service contracts figure. If anyone has any questions on any of the reports, we'd be happy to field those. Thank you.
Thank you both. Any questions?
So it's fair to say that we're very close to our modified budget right now, right? Our overall numbers seem very close, and you mentioned in your report one revenue line is higher than expected and one of the expense lines is lower than expected, but it's all good news, right?
Right now, it does appear that we're going to end the year a bit under the modified budget. I would still suspect that we're going to dip into our fund balance, but I don't think it will be by quite as much as we had predicted in the modified budget. So that's a good thing.
Thanks.
Any other financially related questions? All right, thank you, Adam and Sean. Trustees reporting out and upcoming events. Do any trustees have any library activity they would like to share? Anything you've participated in over the last month or anything upcoming that you'd like to share with us? Donna, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the library leadership for the memorial that's being planned for Stephen Winters. I was really very touched and very moved to see that. I know what a huge supporter he was of the libraries and such a giving community member. And so that was really, really lovely to see. And I'm definitely going to at least make it for the tree planting on the 29th. So thank you.
He was actually one of the first library patrons I was formally introduced to. So it's kind of a sad when that we heard about his passing.
He was a very dear friend of one of my former colleagues who passed away in 2015. And that's really how I got to know Stephen. And he was just a lovely, lovely human being.
Arlene?
Yes, okay. And I don't know if she's going to speak on this later, but Melanie participated in steering committee meeting with the West Hill West End neighborhoods, and she was wonderful. She delivered a presentation about the budget, about not just about the budget. I mean, that was like part of it, but it's mostly about what the library was doing, the services that it provides and did provide over the course of the pandemic. And I tell you, the people in that room really appreciated, you know, what she had to say. So she made a wonderful presentation on behalf of the library. And you'll probably hear about this later, so forgive me if I'm speaking early on this. But I received a call from the university to let me know about the opening of the Brothers exhibit at the Arbor Hill West Hill Library. And I am so excited about that. So I don't know if I'll be able to be in attendance for that, but I was just excited to get that call from the university to let me know that you guys are installing a permanent exhibit.
I also agree on that, Arlene, as well. I think that is certainly awesome to have that exhibit there.
Mhm.
I want to thank Ms. Jarre for her work on the West Hill Community Center. She put a lot of work in that as well.
No problem.
Thank you everyone for sharing. Just one final call. If any trustees have anything else they would like to add.
We are just breezing through the Percy Jackson audiobooks on the Libby app in our house. So it's not in the library. We're just downloading, but major libraries.
Thank you.
It still is library use. So.
If all trustees have shared, then I believe we have a report from the nominating committee next.
Oh, you're muted.
We have been a busy team. We met on the 16th of March to plan strategy for the information session that we would hold, and what we would do, how we would go about the business of engaging a wider community and outreach and the process. And again, I have to give kudos to the library staff and to my colleagues, because Dr. Robinson and Donna Dixon were absolutely amazing. So as a result of the outreach and the work that was done again by Melanie and by Stephanie and others, we had 34 people express interest in running for trustee. We had good attendance in our session. So, that was real team effort, and I just appreciate all the work that was poured into that.
That's fantastic.
I just want to just chime in as well. You did a great job, Arlene. I received at least 4 calls from folks who are so geared up to run for the library, and I just think it was great. They gave us a lot of compliments on the informational session. And I think just having that great feedback is so good.
Yeah. Thank you. It was a real team effort. We'll see what happens in a couple of weeks when people are showing up for the forum, when they're turning in their petitions. But this is a very good start.
That's really great. Before going to the next report, does anybody have any questions for Arlene and the nominating committee?
Do we know if anybody has turned in their petitions yet? Or would we not know that?
I don't know early.
So they're not due in until April 27th. And generally we do ask them that when they turn it into the school district, that they also give us a copy, and they get shuffled over to me, and I have not seen any as of yet.
But the thing that they know is that they can't be lazy about the process. They know it's competitive. And so it's not about just collecting the minimum numbers. They've got to stay vigilant so that come election night, people will go vote for them. So that was the conversation.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Arlene, and the nominating committee. This is really good, really great work. Next committee is the executive committee. The executive committee met also on March 16th, and we had one item of business that was reviewing and approving the board clerk job posting. So this was the piece that came after the job description. The job posting was what went up online to let people know when the deadline is for the posting, hours worked, compensation, and details like that. So we were able to approve the details of the job posting and get the job posted. I believe we've received somewhere between 5 and 7 applications for the position, which I've been trying to upload to the Google Drive, and I've shared with the executive committee. We discussed interviewing candidates and meeting as a committee prior to our full May board meeting. So hopefully we will have a candidate to put forward to the board at our next full board meeting. Does anybody have questions on the executive committee meeting that we had? All right, thank you. Our next committee is the Policy and Governance Committee.
Thank you very much, Sarah. We met and we reviewed the patron behavior code, and we asked that it be sent to council. And I think the document that you can see, but I can't, was vetted by Bob, and we'll be discussing it later. Thank you.
And I do want to just add the correction there. It's not the patron behavior policy. It is just the behavior policy that was amended several years ago because we're expecting our staff to follow the policy as well. So we wanted to remove that word patron because we're expecting everybody who walks into the library, whether they're a patron or not, to follow the behavior.
Thank you very much, Melanie. That is a very important point.
Thank you, Sarah. And I know you said we'll be seeing that policy, but before we move on, does anyone have any questions for Sarah or the Policy and Governance Committee? All right. Thank you, Sarah. The next committee is the Ad Hoc Executive Director Search Committee. I know Brigitte wasn't able to make it tonight, but Donna or Jarre, if one of you would like to just present to the board on how your last meeting went, that would be great.
Sure. And Jarre and I agreed I would do a quick report. Our last meeting was on March 28th, which was a Monday. Pretty much the entire meeting was an executive session because we discussed specific individuals who had applied for the executive director position. We had that discussion. We selected candidates to interview and came up with some next steps as to establishing dates for those interviews. That's really all that I can say in the public part of the meeting. I will be asking when at the appropriate time for us to go into executive session so that we can have a little bit of a discussion just to confirm a couple of things in terms of individuals' dates, et cetera. I believe there may be a date conflict with one trustee, so we'd like to have that conversation in executive session just because we will be confirming those individuals.
Thank you, Donna.
Yep, thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Donna or Jarre regarding the last committee meeting they held?
Thanks, Donna, for that.
Yep.
Okay, and we will, as Donna said, we can discuss later. And the last committee report is the UHLS report.
Okay, we met on March 9th. We had a pretty packed agenda. We talked about Advocacy Day, the new partnership with the Mid-Hudson Library System, and staffing changes that are occurring within the Upper Hudson Library System. For Advocacy Day, at that point, we were talking about what had happened on March 2nd and how successful it was. There was strong representation from the member libraries. The directors and staff, trustees showed up in full force, and the impact is realized in how we placed in the state's budget. So amazing work to everybody who was involved with Advocacy Day. With the partnership between Upper Hudson System and Mid-Hudson Library System, they're going to we are entering an agreement to share e-content through Overdrive at no cost to member libraries. So I understand information went out to everyone so that they could, so that the member libraries could understand how everything would roll out. But Upper Hudson will be available if anyone has questions about what needs to happen. But it seems as though an additional resource was added to all of our member libraries at no extra cost. So that's always a good thing. And staff in Upper Hudson has been having transitions. So they lost 2 long-term members, and we're in the process of interviewing to fill those positions. And they hired a temporary person, but pretty much that's it. They seem to be really on top of it. As change occurs, they're ready for it. So that's a good thing for all of us. With regard to the committee reports, the Finance Committee was the one that met, and they say that we're on track in terms of our spending and our budget. They talked about, they shared information about the purchase journal. They said that the funding reflected, the monies that were spent reflected what was done to refurbish a space for tenants. So they've done some cleanup, but some things will be adjusted as tenants are identified and they want something specific on for their area. But that's how monies were spent. And then funds were spent to support a program that Alice Green implemented that was system-wide. That was part of the readers group. She did something, she wrote a book on racial equity, how to address that. And so books were purchased. And so that was what was reflected in the purchase journal. Upper Hudson received $36,000, which was dispersed to the member library system through the local library service aid program from the state. And we approved the budget. The board, the trustees approved what was presented to us by the Finance Committee. Equity, the racial equity training is in full motion. In fact, we're the first ones, the trustees from Upper Hudson were the first people to get started. We've had 3 sessions out of 5 already. And I have to tell you, it was wonderful. It was, the consultants are very engaging. The trustees is a diverse group, right? But they were able to make everyone feel comfortable in their own skin, and they created an environment where people felt comfortable about sharing things that were uncomfortable for them. And it was all right, it was a safe space. So I'm looking forward to what happens when it rolls out to other member libraries. but I can only see good things happening from that. And then other than that, we've changed, we've transitioned. So now our meetings moving forward are going to be in person. We're not doing virtual anymore. and that was pretty much it for us for the evening. We had good discussion though. And like I said, we were very busy on the month of March. So any questions for me? More to follow.
Thank you, Arlene. Next up is the Executive Director's Report. Melanie.
So in March, to go over our COVID-19 updates, we had one staff member test positive for COVID. Went through all protocols that we normally have set up for that. After the March board meeting, we did ease our restrictions a bit more as we are now in the low rating as designated by the CDC. So we took the remainder of the month to make adjustments in order to further open up our services. So even though it was decided upon in March that we were going to open up, we took the rest of the month to then open up meeting rooms and in-person programmings in April. We're slowly ramping up and will be fully operational by May is our intent. Once again, I do want to note that to people that our programs are planned months in advance. So it was that our programming is a little hard to turn quickly on a dime because we have to plan like 2 to 3 months in advance. So right now we're working on stuff that was being worked on in February. So we were still in the high and I think moderate at that time. So with our services and programs, we made March a little bit of a transition month to focus shifting those services to in-person programming. So we backed off a little bit of our virtual programming and our tutoring and resume job assistance were the two programs that really showed and took a shine in the month of March. And they had steady participation in both of those programs. They were actually our highest participation we've had in a while. Operations, our Bach renovations have concluded and the new study room with a garden view has opened up and the pictures are in the director's report for that. That space is now one of our most popular to reserve. So people are flocking to that branch to have private study space that has a nice open view to the sunshine. Excuse me. For administration, this is a tough one. We onboarded our new director of HR, who is absolutely fabulous. And then 2 weeks later, she had to submit her letter of resignation. So on Monday, she is going to have her last day with us. We're very sad to see her go, but she was offered a very lucrative position at another location, and we could not fault her for taking that. So she has been diligently working behind the scenes, though, to tighten up our HR just in the month that she's been here. She's been absolutely fabulous. And she was actually scheduled to originally resign on Friday, but she's going to stay through Monday to help us onboard 2 extra individuals so she can help us with that onboarding process. We were hoping to have her position posted by April 8th, where it's instead going to probably be tomorrow that we're posting her position. We had a couple last minute details to work through, but we're hoping to get that posted and a new individual hired for that position soon. Statistics, as the person who runs the statistics every month, it was really exciting to see that at many of our locations, our juvenile circulation is at pre-pandemic numbers. So we have, gone back up and those numbers have rebounded. So it's good to see that the children are back utilizing the library and our materials. Our main drop, because if you look at the overall circulation numbers, we're still at a decline. And that's a lot of our, especially our physical media. So videos, CDs, DVDs, music continue to decline in the physical aspect because they're being supplemented with the streaming service. So while we're seeing less physical checkout of those, we're seeing an increase in e-media use. Our safety, update is that we did have 4 loss of library privileges in March, and they were all due to repeated behavioral problems. So these were people who were repeat offenders for behavioral problems, mainly focusing on yelling at staff and patrons. We've actually seen a reduction in the verbally and physically violent incidents in the last month. So we see that as a plus. It just got, people are just, it's your general disruptive behavior issues that we're dealing with at this point. So while it's still not an ideal situation, it's better than it was. So we're, I think reducing and eliminating the mask mandate helped with that a lot. Because we focus on March in the director's report, we don't focus on upcoming programs. They're later down outside of my summary, but I do want to, because Arlene brought it up, we do have the Brothers exhibit that's coming up at the end of the month on April 28th at 6 p.m. at our Arbor Hill, West Hill location. It's a fabulous, I keep hearing nothing but positive things. I haven't been able to see it, what's going up myself, because they haven't brought it into the branch yet. But from those who have talked about it, it's supposed to be wonderful. And it has a great, 2 of the former members of the Brothers are going to be in attendance to speak. So we're very excited about that program. And then the following day on April 29th is the dedication of the commemorative bench at the Howe location for former patron Stephen Winters. And it's in cooperation with the Schuyler Mansion, who is doing a tree planting in his honor as well. So it's a joint project with the 2 organizations. And with that, I will open it up for the executive director report, and then I'm going to refer back to the informational memo in a second. Yes, Sarah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, okay.
Melanie,
Yes.
I just want to compliment you for all of the work that you've been doing and seeing the library through this very difficult transition. And it's a pleasure to be able to see you smiling. And I think, speaking for myself and the rest of the board, if I may, we appreciate everything that you're doing. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you all. It's been difficult. I have a fabulous team. I can't do it without my team. I will tell you, we've really tightened up our teamwork, and we have been relying on each other. So I want to give a huge shout out to my entire administration team, and the entire library as a whole. Everybody, it takes a village, and it really has taken an organization to keep us afloat. And I appreciate everything everybody's been doing. Brenda.
I'm sorry. I was just giving her full applause. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Thank you for everything.
So I'm going to just touch base on the informational memo. I included the org chart that was requested at the last board meeting to kind of go over how our current alignment is, and including the vacant positions. So in the last month, we've actually taken a few large steps. We've hired, I believe it was 6 individuals across the organization in the last month. So those positions in the facilities department were at full staff for the first time in quite a while in our facilities department. And we've, the Bach branch is back to full staff. And I believe those are the only ones that are full staff. We've had some shifting around. And then, as I mentioned, our director of HR position is soon to be vacant as of technically the end of this week. The part-time HR specialist position is still vacant because we're waiting to get the director to hire the assistant in that position, so they complement each other with skill sets. And then we did find out we are going to be losing 2 of our branch managers shortly. So one is at our Washington Avenue location. One of the co-branch managers there is his last day is Friday with us. And then we were just given notice that our branch manager at Howe is moving on to another organization at the end of May.
Tor?
Yeah. So Tor and Jim. So 2 of our long-term staff members who have been vital in the organization and leading some really great initiatives are going to be very sorely missed because they did great things. They've all said they would still be active with us as much as they can. But yeah, so we will be posting those positions probably tomorrow as well. So just it's the sign of the times. It's what I keep referring back. It's the great shift and reorg of the whole library industry seems to be happening right now. So everybody's taking advantage of that. And that is it for me. If anybody has any other questions?
Thank you, Melanie, for providing the chart.
No problem.
Yeah, it's really, really helpful. And it's very well put together, but it's a great visual to really see what we're talking about when we're talking about all this.
Yeah.
So thank you.
It's changed daily. So that's why I didn't get it to anybody until today, because literally we knew 3 things were changing as of yesterday. So
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Melanie.
Hey, Mel,
yes.
on the position that you usually occupy,
Mhm.
you have it listed as an L4. I think it's actually assistant library director 4.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you're in that assistant library director title, and it's driven as a 4 because the library director's a 4.
Okay.
Which we haven't filled in a long time because we have the executive director.
Correct. I will change that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I'll double check that for you, but I'm pretty sure that's the title that is assigned to your vacancy or your position.
Mhm. Okay, and then the next item is also an informational item. I did, once Arlene kind of referenced this before as well. I wanted to give everybody a listing of the community and neighborhood and association reports that we are doing for our budget season, as we like to call it. We did present last week at the West Hill Steering Committee meeting, which was a wonderful session. I'm all excited about the baseball that's happening. I want to see how I can help out with that. And then Sheridan Hollow, we spoke at last night, which was another wonderful organization. Great responses to the budget proposal and to what we've been doing with the library. And then in the future, you'll see that we have the Delaware Neighborhood Association, Arbor Hill Neighborhood Association, Mansion, Hudson Park, Pine Hills, Helderberg, South End, Park South, Beverwick, and then Cana, which is the Council of Albany Area Neighborhood Associations. We do want to also note that we have the in-person Meet the Candidate Forum on May 3rd. I thought I had Arbor Hill Neighborhood Association on the 19th. We're just waiting to see if it's virtual or in person, I think is what we're waiting on confirmation on. That's why it was the question marks were there. So May 3rd is the Meet the Candidate Forum, where we will be meeting all the candidates and we'll be discussing, depending on how many candidates we have, how we will present that. But we also do a budget and community report shortened version during the beginning of that session. That will be recorded and live streamed. We're doing it from our Washington Avenue branch, which will have hopefully the new AV system up and running by then. We're hoping to finish the installation of that this week. And then we did have 2 neighborhood associations that are unfortunately were not meeting until after the budget vote, but they still want us to come and present the community report portion of it and hopefully a meet the new director presentation, because this will be in late May, early June when they're meeting. And those are Center Square and North Albany neighborhood associations. So even though we won't be presenting on the budget, we'll still be providing them with a community report.
Does anyone have any questions about the neighborhood meetings?
Yeah, I have one question. So I found these neighborhood meetings very helpful in past years when I've gone to them. But my question is actually, isn't it, didn't we used to do 2 meet the candidate forums? Like 2 identical presentations?
I think there was one year we did. I do recollect that. I think just because of the weirdness of the year, we weren't sure how things were going to go. So that's why we only scheduled the one. And I think right now, because there is a tight turnaround with the collecting the signatures, timing of our board meeting and the timing of the vote, it was going to be difficult to do two. So that's why we only have the one.
Okay. Thank you.
But we are live streaming it and recording it for others to watch at a later date. So we hopefully that will help with that situation of anybody who can't attend that day.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I believe we're ready to move to new business. And the first item I see is the behavior policy. I'm not sure. Would somebody like to walk us through the behavior policy?
Melanie, do you mind doing it? Sure. Let me, one moment. Can you guys see that? No, it's maybe a little small, but so with the behavior policy, we were tightening up language essentially. We had a couple of concerns that some of the language that we used, especially disobeying the directions of library staff members, was a little offensive to any population. So we wanted to tighten up some of that language. And we also took the opportunity to really look at some of the unacceptable activities that were outlined and to see if they still were legal, because some of the laws had changed with some of these, and how we could tighten up to really address what we're trying to get at. So for the disobeying the directions of library staff, we had suggested ignoring the instructions of library staff members, and I like Bob's edits to it, which were failing to follow the instructions of library staff members. I believe that would suffice. So either one, I mean, it's up to you guys, but I think either one would work for our staff. With the examples, and once again, we do state that this is not an exhaustive list, but it provides just kind of a guidance of unacceptable behavior in the library. We had just a grammatical correction: sleeping, lying down, or engaging in activities that interfere with others' library's use. It was a grammatical edit for that. Gambling. This came up because online gambling is now legal in New York State. And so it would be almost nearly impossible for us to monitor what people are doing on the computers on any given moment. So it could be removed, as the behavior in question that we were concerned about is the loud and disruptive behavior, which is addressed at the very first bullet point, that engaging in loud, aggressive, or threatening conduct, fighting or challenging another in a fight, profane language, or obscene behavior, or engaging in harassing behavior of any kind. We felt that that was the behavior that we were looking to remedy. And so we didn't have to specifically state gambling, because if they were technically quiet about the gambling in a back corner, we probably wouldn't notice them anyway. But if they were being disruptive, that's what we were trying to eliminate. The using, or what was it? Being under the influence of drugs and or alcohol, which causes erratic behavior, or disrupting the use of libraries by others. Because it was under the influence of drugs and or alcohol, we wanted to state using, distributing, or how do we have this?
little b for being under the
Yeah.
influence.
But yeah, so using, distributing, or being under the influence of drugs and or alcohol, which causes erratic behavior or disruptive use of library use. Yes, because we just had said using, distributor, or being under the influence. And once again, we didn't say, when we said drugs or alcohol, in the instances, there can be people who are on prescription drugs. So we wanted to, just tighten up the language of that to make it more what we're trying, the behavior that we were trying to eliminate. So that's why instead of using, distributing, or being under the influence of alcohol or drugs, using, distributing, or being under the influence of drugs and or alcohol, which causes the erratic behavior or disruptive use of the library by others. The eating or, so the next bullet point used to say covered drinks are permitted in the library. We just reworded that because the whole idea was stating the unacceptable behavior. So we just reworded it to make the tenses match. So it's eating and drinking, eating and drinking in undesignated areas and having uncovered drinks in all areas of the library. And then we did give it with a caveat, any trash from said eating must be deposited properly in trash receptacles. That's essentially what we're looking for. And then the using tobacco products in the library. We felt that this was a little too narrow. So we said using tobacco products or other smokable or vapable products in the library that would cause aerosol particles to be dispersed. Because it's the smoking aspect of it that we are trying to avoid. And we didn't want to say, I'm not using tobacco products, I'm using some other product. It's the whole concept of the product itself and creating the smoke that we were trying to avoid. But we also kept it with tobacco products because we also wanted to make sure that chew and other tobacco products of that nature were also covered. And then the having bodily hygiene that is so offensive as to constitute a disturbance to other patrons using the library. It has been challenged multiple times. That is a difficult and kind of offensive to state to people as well. It's a difficult topic to discuss. So we said having possessions or belongings that are of a strong odor that impedes the use of the library by others, including heavily applied perfumes, lotion, and hygiene products that may cause chemical sensitivity in others, was one of the suggestions that we stated. Because sometimes the people who are dousing themselves in colognes are just as offensive as somebody with that is poor hygiene. So there was a question on whether or not carrying weapons of any kind. That was brought up by one of the board members, and Bob says, yes, we can prohibit weapons. How we enforce it is trickier, but we can state that in our behavior policy. So that is, Bob, do you want to speak to that any bit? Or should we wait until the end?
No, I mean, it's that simple. I mean, you're not going to be searching people as they come in. And so if somebody is truly concealing a weapon, you're not going to know it. But you can absolutely prohibit it. And if you determine that somebody is violating it, I would just call the police and have them deal with it.
Okay.
The reason I said okay question mark on the earlier one is that you've taken away the hygiene. And I think you're giving you're opening yourself to a bit of a hole there. If you're not going to enforce hygiene anymore, that's fine, but it's not there anymore.
In the mental health awareness trainings that we've been attending, it's not addressing the person, but it's the possessions is how we've been. It's their possession. It's usually their clothing or their belongings.
Okay. It's as long as you're comfortable with that, that's fine. But this turns it more into the, their stuff smells or they're putting a lotion on or perfume on. And that's not what it was initially driven to, which is fine. It's the library's policy. if you were trying, if the intention was to enforce the other, you're giving yourself a harder row to hoe now.
Okay.
I just wanted it to be fair and easier for the staff to be able to deal with. And if you read the whole document, we're talking about behaviors that could impose how others are using the library. And in many policies that I've seen, that it never addresses, I'll say, dueling axe wearers, axe being the spray cologne, which can really trigger reactions in other people. So we wanted it to be broad enough to talk about all strong odors that impedes the use of the library by others. And that's why we drifted away, if I remember correctly, Melanie,
Well,
from
you've
safe
added that part.
hygiene.
That part's added very clearly, but you've literally removed the other piece. And if that's intentional, it's okay, but it's not there now, right?
So maybe
But
it
we're
would be-
talking about the,
So what if a person comes in, they don't have a single belonging with them, but they clearly have such poor hygiene that people are moving around them, moving away from them in the library. If the intention is not to do anything about that person at all, you're fine. But if the intention is to say to that person, your presence in the library is disruptive and we're going to ask you to leave, they don't have anything at all with them, you've now made this policy almost impossible to enforce against them.
so strong odor would not work for all patrons.
No, it's possessions or belongings that have a strong odor.
I
This
see what
isn't
he's
the
saying.
possessions or belongings, this is the person.
Oh, the light bulb just went off. I see what you're saying.
So if we said having bodily hygiene
Slash
or
possession, slash
belonging,
belonging.
yeah, that are of strong odor.
Thank you for seeing it with a critical eye, Bob. I appreciate it greatly.
Well, again, it comes down to what you're trying to do. And I understand why this is a sensitive topic and libraries struggle with it all across the state. And some have abandoned it because they just don't want to take it on, and that's okay too. But the missing word will come back to be an issue if that's what you're trying to enforce.
Duly noted. I think, Melanie, we need to add that.
Okay.
Jarrett?
I'm on board with it.
And then the last one was the bringing animals other than guide and service animals. And then we added as defined by the American with Disabilities Act and include the link to that into the library, except for designated library programming. And Bob said, because we were always concerned, this is one that we struggle with. So we were wondering if there should be further tightening of the wording. And Bob actually responded with this is actually not helpful. And he.
Yeah, the problem is that the statute doesn't speak to it. What has happened is the interpretations of the statute have been that the statute doesn't allow you to require any evidence. So by putting the words in there, you're actually, I think, somebody who knows this stuff and enforces it is going to come and say, statute doesn't say anything about this. They're just going to rub it in your face.
Okay.
It's a tough thing. Service animals are tough. They've gotten a lot broader. The government is very protective of service animals of all type, whether or not you and I would see them as service animals or not. And I think what you have to do is just deal with them on a case-by-case basis. And generally speaking, it goes to that disruption factor. As long as the animal is not impeding others' use, you probably should just assume that it's, a proper service animal because they don't have to produce documentation.
Correct. But they do have to be under the control of the owner.
Under control, not being disruptive, not being violent or threatening,
Mhm. I think that we did.
not having
And-
bodily hygiene that's so offensive as to cause a disruption.
Yep.
But we cover that as a possession, right?
Correct, yeah. So, and just for those who aren't familiar with it, with the into the library, except for designated library programming, we added that a few years back because a patron actually rightly so, argued about us having farm animals in the library for a program because it was against our own policy. And like I said, this is a behavior policy, not a patron behavior policy. So the board voted that for designated library programming, we were allowed to have animals in the library. Donna, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, just a follow-up question about animals in the library and specifically referring to having the animal under your control. Just a question for you. Sometimes having an animal under your control, some people can interpret that, and it can sometimes be interpreted as under verbal control, which I don't think is enough. And I'm wondering if there needs to be something specific regarding, you know, any animal that may be admitted to the library being on a leash, and if whether, especially in the case of dogs, whether the leash law in the city of Albany would apply in that case. I just would like to make it as strong as possible in terms of control.
I don't know how the leash law reads with respect to service animals, to be honest, Donna. I've never looked at that. It's an interesting question. We, of course, don't even mention the words control here. That's just the standard that applies.
Right.
So you might actually want to add those words if you're concerned about that. Bringing animals other than guide and service animals under the patron's direction and control into the library. I will tell you, I think that there are cases that say that certain service animals don't have to necessarily be leashed.
Okay.
So I'd be a little bit nervous about saying leash specifically, but I get your point, and I don't really know how the city's leash law is written on that point.
Okay. Yeah. Nor do I.
Some of them have exceptions for service animals.
Yeah.
You know, because of course a service animal can't really do their job if they're on a leash all the time. Certain ones.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. I guess it was the word under the owner's control, or the phrase the under the owner's control, that I was concerned about. But since it's not explicitly stated here, I think it's probably best to just leave it.
Tom, looks like you're next with your hand raised.
Yeah, so I have a question. I have two questions. The first one is back on the strong odor policy. Do we, I'm sorry if I'm being too particular, but do we know at what point an odor would impede others' use of the library, right? Like in Bob's example, moving away from a person might impede your, right? If you're trying to sit and read, that might impede where you want to sit and read, but it also might not. You might just walk past and continue with your day, and it might not impede anyone. And I was just wondering if we ever run into questions like that on the in practice of applying this. And my other question is kind of similar on this policy, and it's like, what are chemical sensitivities?
So with the first question, it's generally when we've had issues with this in the past, and it's something that this is one of our more common issues that we have with individuals. It's usually people will come up to us and they're like, I can't be in the same room. This person smells so much. Staff usually recognize that they get, it's creating unwelcome physical reactions when the person's there. And it's generally, in all honesty, patrons usually come up to us first because they're a lot of times closer to the individual. If they're sitting somewhere in the library, sitting out in one of the seats. But generally, so that's usually when we do it. And we've had training on how to take the person aside and address it in a respectful manner with them. For the most part, people understand, and we do have resources available so they can get any assistance that they may need to address the issue. For the chemical sensitivities, it's becoming more and more prevalent. There's a lot of individuals. I know those with migraines, those with fibromyalgia, certain scents can trigger episodes, even epilepsy. I've had individuals, thankfully not on my staff here, but I've seen it in the past where certain scents will trigger an immediate physical response, nausea, headaches, blurred vision, and whatnot. So there's a lot of people who experience those, and it makes it where you can't even be in the same room with that individual. I know even I have to work around, because I'm a migraine sufferer, so I have to work around facilities sometimes if they're spraying the cleaning solutions. Like I have to make sure I'm out of the area, or else I get triggered. So.
Okay, so
go ahead.
So I guess my question is like, is being disturbed by an odor a chemical sensitivity? Because I think it would have to be to make the policy what we want it to be.
So I don't think it does it, because it could be, trigger a chemical sensitivity. And usually if it's something of excessive use of deodorant or cologne or body spray or anything of that nature, usually that's how it's addressed. While we appreciate you trying, it's a little much, can you go, into the restroom, maybe wash some of it off and whatnot, because it's causing others around you to have, usually we say, some of our staff have sensitivities, or some patrons have, has stated the smell is making them nauseous, or, we do it, like I said, delicately, but, just explain to the person and provide them a way to remedy the situation in the immediacy, so we don't have to ask them to leave.
Okay.
And Melanie, I just wanted to add something to Tom's first question in regards to how do we define or characterize impeding the use of, because I think we've had this conversation in the past, or maybe it was when I was on the policy committee, but I feel like one of the examples I heard was computer usage. Basically any area in the library where there are finite resources and somebody's trying to use something in particular in a particular area that they can't necessarily move. So like a desktop where it's in an area and maybe all the computers are in use and somebody is sitting next to a person. One of those situations, because I know everything else, it seems like what you were saying, Tom, I agree. If they're reading in a room, it's like, well, we have other spaces, you could go read in another room. I think it's in these instances where there are limited resources in set areas that can't be moved. I just remember the conversation from the past.
I mean, obviously our goal is to keep the individuals in the library. So we will work with both parties. If it is, offensive to one, but not offensive to somebody else, that we will work with both parties. Like, hey, can we move you to this area? When it comes to computers, we even have the option with laptops now. It's like, hey, we can provide you with a laptop and you can move to another area. Would that suffice, to make things a little easier?
Okay, thanks. That's all really helpful. I do have one other question. Is it okay if I ask that now, or?
Sure.
Okay. The gambling policy.
I know your face when I was mentioning that.
I don't know if we should get rid of that. I mean, even if the gambling is quiet, it is illegal to gamble. Certainly in a public place, I have to imagine it is. Obviously, sports gambling on your phone is no problem, but like playing dice or money, even a card game with money, I don't know if we want that in the library.
And that's what the original intent was, but the concern with the committee was that, if you strictly say gambling, the online gambling is allowed now in the sports betting, like you said. So it would be a difficult.
Why don't you just insert the word illegal gambling?
Okay.
I mean, that cuts it right down to the things you can't do, right?
Yeah, if the committee wants that. I mean, I know you said that the type of gambling you don't want might be covered by other policies, but I don't know, just something to consider when you review.
I mean, we do have under it's one of the last bullet points, actually under the animal one, that does say committing any act that would violate any state, federal, or local law, ordinance, or regulation. So technically that is covered, would be covered there. So it's, like I said, this is, both would be covered with this policy if we wanted to keep it in either direction. It's just what emphasis would you guys like to put on it?
Okay, thanks, Melanie.
I think these are great questions and it makes it stronger. I just wanted to share, and then Jeray, I will let you respond as well. We wanted first to have a policy that would be enforceable and fair to all and not leave things to people's judgment, because loud could be different for you, Tom, than it is for me. And how many people work in the library, Melanie? So there could be 100 different interpretations of what loud could be. So we were trying to go for language that was more enforceable. Bob, there is no link that anywhere that talks about what kind of animals are service animals. Again, to give staff a tool to make judgment, or not to make judgment, but to give guidance, because we don't want staff to make judgments. We want a document that is as clear from that as possible. So that's one thing. And the last one is, I think this is one of the most important policies a library can have. And we want to make sure that it fits into our plan of service and the work that we want to be doing in the community. Jeray,
No, we can all see what you're typing.
Oh, sorry.
Jeray, it's you now.
Thank you, everybody, for taking a look at this. I just wanted to just make one comment. I think it's great what Tom brought up. I mean, we do want to have other perspectives and other eyes on it. So I think it can only be an asset if we just add in the illegal gambling in the portion that was pointed out in reference to the gambling. I know we have it covered on the back end, but just, any person looking at it just to provide more clarity, I think that would be acceptable. I'm okay with that.
And as you might have seen, I did have a staff member text me or chat with me to ask about the illegal or the alcohol consumption. And that was something that they brought up. It was similar to the gambling, that the way we have it worded currently with the addition was using, distributing, or being under the influence of drugs and or alcohol, which causes erratic behavior or disrupting the use of library by others. It almost makes it sound like quiet alcohol use is allowed. And I would argue that it also follows because public consumption of alcohol is illegal. So it would fall under that illegal policy as well. But if we wanted to, once again, strengthen the policy to make sure.
I think so. I think it would be a good idea because you always have people that are going to push the envelope no matter what, and as thorough as we can be, I think would be great.
So we could technically separate those two out. So we could say using, distributing, or being under the influence of drugs, which causes erratic behavior or disrupting the use of libraries by others, and using or distributing or being under the influence of alcohol.
Melanie,
Outright.
may I suggest that we make the corrections and clean up this document and vote on this at our next meeting when people can see the whole document clearer and the language would be more.
That is up to you guys.
I do want to just mention, though, I think what you just suggested was good, Melanie. And I'm in agreement with both of you guys as well. I think that would be fine.
Yeah, I think Sarah's idea would be helpful for me as well.
So I think everybody's on the same page.
Oh, good. We have our first old business for next month. Yay. Thank you all. Speaking for Jarre and Brigitte, we really appreciate more eyes. It makes it a stronger document, and the intent is important. So thank you.
And thank you all for the work. You guys put in a lot of work. Thank you.
So generally, we provide the red line document. Would I keep this document as a reference and then clean it up and present the cleaned up version separate? Is that what I'm hearing the board would prefer?
No, I think we want the red line. We just want the red line with the additional changes added. Yeah.
Donna, you have a question.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, was to have them both would be helpful, just to see how those changes are, how they read, you know, just in a clean format. I'm hesitating just a tiny little bit with the using, distributing, or being under the influence of drugs or alcohol, which causes erratic behavior. I feel like there's a comma that's missing.
It could be.
It could be like one of those Hamilton commas, my dearest Angelica. Because someone could argue that, well, you know, I had a couple of drinks, but I'm not behaving erratically. So I'm just wondering if there's a way to just wordsmith that a little bit to say resulting in erratic behavior, which may disrupt the use of the library by others, or something like that.
That's why
we could just say, or acting in an erratic way that disrupts the, like it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need the which causes, because alcohol, like you could have a lovely glass of wine and enjoy your book.
Right.
But we don't want that to happen. We don't want that.
May cause. So it's not a definitive result, but it may cause. Then I think we capture the using, distributing, or being under the influence, as well as a potential effect of that.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue as an editor of in a past life that we don't need the cause at all. We can just say you can't do drugs or drink alcohol in the library. It doesn't matter what the cause is. But
there's three different things that are happening here, though. There's using, always a problem. There's distributing, always a problem. And then there's being under the influence, if that causes erratic behavior or disrupts the use of the library by others.
Right.
Those are the three things that you're prohibiting. The last one is the only one that's modified. And there is a Harvard comma after distributing for that reason.
Can we just state it the way Bob just said it?
So is it the way that it's stated then? Using, distributing?
I think it's written right. I think it's hard to read with all the red line, but I think it's written correctly.
Okay.
And are we okay with keeping drugs and alcohol on the same one, or do we want to split them up?
I'm fine with them being on the same one.
Arlene.
Okay. Do we want to consider people who are being affected by prescription drugs?
And I think that's why we added the, maybe that's another one we should say, illegal drugs.
You know what? Now that I'm reading it again, now Donna's right. We'll futz with this, and we'll get you something that works better, because the using and distributing is referring to the drugs and alcohol, which is coming after that modified clause. So we'll rewrite it.
Okay.
To your point,
Arlene, just people could have prescribed drugs and have erratic behavior because they may have taken too many.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's why we don't want to use illegal.
And the other thing too is that I'm concerned about safety. So we're concerned, you know, we've been talking about people having erratic behavior and maybe causing harm to other people, but people could get their own selves into trouble, you know, if they're imbalanced or whatever, because you know, And it could be caused by medicine that they're taking. Maybe they should be home resting. So I don't know. So I don't know, when you start talking about cause, maybe we could figure it out so that we could have an umbrella that would cover anything that's going to cause an impairment.
Because this is the tough one, because I allude to it in a lot of customer service trainings. You know, you have individuals who, you know, who may be diabetic, who, you know, their prescription levels are still adjusting, and they could be acting erratic or in a, you know, slurred way because of that. We have individuals who take medication, you know, that's legitimate medication, and they could, you know, once again, just have, it might be a new medication that they're taking, you know, as prescribed, and they're just having a reaction to it. Because once again, this is staff, it's behavior policy, so it's staff and patrons as well, or anybody who walks in our doors, essentially what we're doing. So that's why we are trying to find that tough balance between addressing the behavior of the problematic usage of whatever people are ingesting versus the allowable use of something that's in a legal format that doesn't cause them to be disruptive. Jenna.
I think that, so we're going on like 15, 20 minutes on the drug and alcohol policy or drug and alcohol line. I think it just makes sense to send it back to committee because I know how much work we have tonight.
Okay. Jarrell?
Yeah, my comment was just, oh, can you hear me? Okay. My comment was just that I think that no matter if it's medicated, unmedicated, under the influence, we kind of have a broad scope of what unacceptable behavior would be. And it's kind of like covered in the initial paragraph in reference to, you know, disorderly conduct. I mean, it doesn't matter what you're under the influence of, whether it be medicated or non-medicated, alcohol or whatever it is, disorderly conduct is disorderly conduct, you know, that's just my thoughts on it.
Okay, so we'll take this back. We'll wordsmith it a little bit. We'll obviously have the discussion with Bob on, and Donna probably we'll loop Donna in because of her lovely wordsmithing that she always helps us with. So
can we have this in like a Google document, and people can make comments between now and our meeting so that we.
So I can do that with the board. Unfortunately, with having Bob weigh in, he cannot work off of the Google documents. So that's why
right. So let's grab some comments and then we can bring it back to Bob. He doesn't have to see our discussions, and I agree we need to move on.
Sorry, I just lost a tab there. The next item is early closing of Delaware branch for FAFL Gala.
So we do this every year, and we figured we would catch it early rather than later. So they have set their date. It's October 1st in the evening at our Delaware location. So as per history and past practice, we are looking to close that location at 3 p.m. to allow for setup. And Jarrell, is your hand still raised? I just want to make sure I addressed you. Okay.
No, I already went.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to close the Delaware branch as provided for in the memo.
Thank you, Tom. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you. Any further comment on the motion? Seeing none, we can do a roll call vote. Myself, I, Dr. Robinson,
Yes.
Tom,
Aye.
Jenna,
Aye.
sorry, I have to go back up. Arlene,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Jarre,
Aye, yeah.
and Donna.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. And our last item under new business, I asked Bob if he could just walk us through the amendments that were made to the open meetings law, so we know what lie ahead in the next couple months.
So thanks, Sarah. This might fall into the category of one of those things you see the picture of the pig designed by committee, and it's got a trunk and wings and 2 extra tails, and it's wearing work boots and everything else because they've tried to make video conferencing possible, and in doing so, they've made it incredibly complicated. So you may know that before the pandemic, public bodies like APL could only engage in video conference meetings if they noticed the location of every meeting site. In other words, in every place that a member of the public body was going to participate as part of its open meetings law notice. And that location had to be open to members of the public to participate from that meeting. So for example, if you wanted to hold an open meeting and Sarah was on vacation in Phoenix, staying at the Phoenician playing golf, and she wanted to hold the meeting in her room, she would have to open her hotel room door. You would have to notice that she's in room 2305, and she'd have to have any member of the public who wanted to come and join her for the meeting there at the Phoenician overlooking the golf course in her room. So it wasn't very practical. They've come up with something that might be a little bit more practical in that now you can pass a local resolution that says that you're going to allow for video conferencing, but it can only be used under certain circumstances. So first and foremost, there has to be a quorum of the board in one of the locations. It's not clear the way it's written whether that is a collective quorum, meaning every person that is participating is part of the quorum, or if there has to be a quorum in one of the locations. And I say that's a little unclear just because they say the quorum has to be in a location or locations. And frankly, if it's locations, then it's a redundant statement. Then it's you just have to have a quorum, which you'd have to have a quorum anyway. So a little bit not entirely clear there. But the point is that ultimately there's going to be one primary meeting site where everyone attends, and then there may be other places that people are coming in for. But they can only video conference in for what they're calling very good reasons or exceptional reasons, actually. There's a whole list of what could be included, like personal illness, disability, caregiving responsibilities, and then the catch-all or other significant or unexpected factor or event which precludes the member's physical attendance at such meeting. So I'm hoping that we'll get some guidance as to what that means, perhaps from the Committee on Open Government. They, by the way, put out a memo, I think it was early this morning, saying that they've gotten the bill and they're looking at it too. They don't have any clear answer as to what they're going to say about it, but they said check back with us here in the next few weeks that they're going to be looking at the bill. The other thing that's important about this is, so you have to have that resolution passed in advance. We have to do that if we're going to do it. It can only be for these certain reasons. In those cases, you won't have to have those other locations open because you'll have had the opportunity for the public to participate in your meeting live and locally. But there are some other things that they're now plugging into the statute that are similar to what we've been required under the pandemic. So if you're going to do this, you have to record the meetings, and you now have to keep that recording, make it available on your website for 5 years from the date of that meeting, and it has to be posted within 5 days of the meeting. So again, we've sort of been complying with those rules because of the rules that have been in place with respect to the pandemic. But for meetings that last a couple hours, those are pretty big files. And so now you're going to end up having to have a lot of files on your website. By the way, one of the other requirements of the new statute is if you're going to video conference, you must have a website. Now, that's not a problem for APL, but there are some organizations who still haven't actually, gotten a functioning website. So that's another piece of this. The other element of it is that all of the video conferencing has to allow for live participation by members of the public. I'm not entirely sure exactly what that means, whether that means you'll have to be able to log in yourself or whether that'll just be at that local site, but we're going to have to nail that down too. The last thing it does is it also says that if there's a state of disaster emergency, that some of these things will remain in effect sort of like they are now. There's a 60-day holdover that allows us to continue doing these things for 60 days, but ultimately, as of June 19th, we've got to be in compliance with this statute if we're going to have video conference meetings any longer. So, a few things to look at. On one hand, it will make video conference meetings easier. On the other hand, I think we'll probably end up going back towards in-person meetings a little bit more commonly. There may be some public bodies that decide to jump through all the hoops and do all their meetings by video conferencing, but I suspect you'll see that a lot more people will return to regular live meetings because of the hoops that are in the statute. I'll answer questions. I'll be honest with you. This is a work in progress, so I'm not sure I'll be able to give you much more than I've done at this point. But certainly, if the board is inclined to have a resolution prepared, we will study this. We'll work with the information that comes out from COOG, and we'll prepare a resolution for you.
Thanks, Bob. I see Sarah's hand.
So right now, we're still under the executive order, and it's been extended to June 19th, I believe you said.
No, the executive order hasn't been extended. That still has the April date. So
Okay.
Right now, we're under that emergency declaration rule. I don't know what the governor is going to do with that. Frankly, now that this is in place, there's not a whole lot of reason for her to worry about it for purposes of open meetings, but there's a lot of other reasons that her emergency declaration may be important. It's not just linked to open meetings. So I don't know what she'll do with that emergency declaration. What this is saying is that we basically have a 60-day grace period to do this as opposed to rely on that.
It is possible, and I know you can't read any, this is that it can continue to be extended month to month until it's lifted.
She may do that. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts on that, but it is linked to a lot more than open meetings, so it's very possible that she'll extend it again.
Thank you.
Certainly the numbers are trending up right now. They're not trending down.
Jarrett?
Bob, just to be safe, can we just run out the time and do the 60 days on this in reference to being in compliance so we can vote to have our meetings virtual? And if the executive order isn't extended, then we can make that determination if we want to go in person? Because technically we don't have to be in compliance until 60 days. Would that be the safest thing to do?
It's almost that simple.
Okay, great.
I'm having a hard time understanding exactly what the intention of the 60-day provision is, because I think the way I read it is it's basically giving us an exemption from having public participation on our meetings live, whereas the executive order is allowing us to do the meetings by video conference. So I'm not sure that if the executive order lapses, we wouldn't still have to meet in person. We could just avoid having the public present in person. That's a little bit unclear to me. I'm going to try and get a better answer to that. But I think we do probably just need to wait and see what the governor does and then decide if she extends it, that you stay in your video conference format for May. But if she doesn't, that you assume that you've got to go back to a live meeting format in May until we pass one of these resolutions. I think that's probably what I would suggest.
So
And
for
just-
the, so are you saying for the video conference, for that 60 days, do we have to vote on that? Or can we just, do we have to vote on it and say we're going to be virtual? Or can we just play out the 60 days and then say, okay, can we vote and say we're going to be virtual for 60 days? And once that 60 days happens, then we say, okay, well, we're going to go in person if the executive order isn't extended.
That's interesting, Jerry. That's a good idea. I'm not sure if that makes that much, if that would help us or not. You know, the 60-day provision as it's written is, I believe, an effort to basically give everybody 2 months to get ready for this thing taking effect. It's just, it's the interaction between that and what the governor has in effect right now that makes me a little confused, because you'll recall they previously amended this very statute to provide for emergency declaration orders. And so it's just, I realize I'm putting you guys in a little bit of a lurch by saying, give me a week or two, because you won't be able to meet if she resolve, or if it turns out one way and the executive order goes away, then you'll have to meet in person. But that would be the best thing for us to do, is, you know, just give me a week to clarify and see if I can get any clarification out of either COOG on how they're going to interpret it, or possibly even, you know, the governor's office. We may be able to get somebody to tell us what's intended there.
Actually,
I mean, you could, I suppose you could do something tonight and say, we're going to have video conferencing no matter what. It's just, you don't have a resolution. You don't have anything prepared to vote on.
Okay.
actually, I think I have an idea, or I just want to lay out some dates. So today's Tuesday, the 12th. I believe the current governor's executive order goes through this Friday, the 15th. And then if it's not extended, it will come off. In terms of meeting in the next week or two, I know we're going to go into executive session to discuss more details about interviewing the executive director candidates, but I believe we were scheduling to potentially do some interviews in 2 weeks. So the full board may be together, and that may have already been planned on. So if there was something that we wanted to vote on in 2 weeks, we may have that possibility. I just wanted to mention that.
That would be an in-person meeting.
We were planning on that.
Okay, well, then that solves it, because by then we certainly can give you something to do, to act on if you need to. And you know, I'm hoping that what we tell you is the 60-day thing works. Don't worry about it. But I do want to get more clarity on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment or suggestion on this as well? With the capability of the new room at Washington Avenue being able to video stream directly without having multiple computers needed up and ready and broadcasting like before, our library would like to suggest that we do all monthly board meetings at the Washington Avenue location. So we could still video stream. I mean, it doesn't need to be a virtual meeting, but we would still like to continue streaming the board meetings because we've been getting a lot of positive feedback that they've been streamed that way. So if we could, we'd like to adjust. The meetings all remain the same, except for the location when they are in person would happen at Washington Avenue. And then we were saying if the need still arises to visit the other branches, we could do that via committee meetings.
That would be something we would have to vote on, correct?
Correct.
So we would put that for unfinished business for next meeting, or?
Yeah, we could do that at the same time we discuss the next one as well.
And I think I know the answer, but it would be for all the committee meetings and the full board meeting. It'd be all,
So what we were doing is for, because I know in the interim last year when we did go back to having live meetings, we only streamed the monthly board meeting to the public, but then the committee meetings would then being on site and in person and open to the public via that manner. We weren't streaming the committee meetings. So we would continue our suggestions to continue in that manner. So we would stream the monthly board meetings, but the committee meetings when they're in person would just happen in person on site and could rotate. And that's how we would get around to rotating between the branches. But we can obviously bring that up for discussion at one of those other meetings.
I think so. I think I agree with Sarah's suggestion that and Bob's suggestion that we really can't decide what we even want to do for next month until we know what happens with the current executive order. So I think we should just wait for that, and then once we get that, hopefully we'll also know more about the new law and things will clear up in between our meetings. So we really don't have anything to decide right now, right? Unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it would be premature to trying to decide it tonight. But either by your next in-person meeting or by May, however that is, I can prepare a resolution to allow you to do this permanently.
Melanie, you're muted.
Oh, I was telling Jare she's muted.
Jare, you're still muted if you're trying to talk.
I'm sorry.
You were muted when you were just talking.
Oh, it's okay.
Okay.
Does anybody have any other questions regarding the change in open meetings law, or is everybody good with the plan that's kind of been laid out? We're just going to give it a little more time and see if any more interpretations come out so we can move forward. Hearing nothing, I'm assuming we're good. Before we move on to our next items on the agenda, I just wanted to circle back. Donna, you mentioned during the committee report you gave earlier that you potentially wanted to discuss some items regarding the ED search in executive session.
Yes, please.
And just clarifying, is it for the reason to discuss individual candidates or personnel, or is it process related, or kind of what?
It's a little bit of both. It's to confirm who the candidates are, and to I think there was a one trustee who is not able to make the dates that were agreed upon, so we wanted to discuss those dates again, or the dates that were put forth. I think not everyone, what I'm hearing is that not everyone answered the doodle poll, and one or more of those dates did not work for one of the trustees.
I see Jare's hand.
Yeah, I just also had another question that I wanted to ask in exec session. So.
Okay, thank you. Wait, you were muted. I didn't catch the last part. Okay. So what I'm hearing is we will need to go into executive session to discuss candidate names, and then potentially If everybody could stay on after the meeting, maybe that would be a better time to talk about scheduling of trustees. It's not something protected under executive session, but it's not something we have to discuss in a public meeting either because it's scheduling purposes. So if that makes sense to keep the personnel issues in executive session, and then we can just discuss scheduling right after, if that's okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just
So
want to
with
make sure that process things happen in public session. This is a hot button issue under the open meetings law.
So scheduling, because we're talking about interviews, should have to happen in executive session, right, Bob? Or no?
No. I mean, the only thing that I would deal with in executive session is disclosure of who your candidates are. If you want to talk about qualifications, rankings, things like that. But if you
Okay.
just want to talk about process, how you're going to do it, who's going to schedule it, what days are available, that's all open session stuff. To Sarah's point, all you're doing is comparing calendars to see who's free. That's not even a meeting. You're just gathering information, so you can do that at the end.
Okay. Will Bob be joining us in executive session? Will you be Bob?
I can if the board needs me. It's totally up to you guys. I don't need to be unless you need me there.
I just have one question for him.
Oh yeah, then yeah.
I
If
need
you
you,
would like,
Bob. Just one question.
I'm
Yes,
available then, yes.
Okay.
So in order to get to executive session, I'm just going to go through the last couple agenda items. We do not have a POP update, correct, Melanie?
Correct.
And then this is the second public comment opportunity.
And there was no extra public comment that came in.
Okay. At this point, if somebody would like to make a motion to move us into executive session for the
I'll make a
purpose of
motion.
discussing personnel and appointing of candidates.
I so move that we go into executive session for the purpose of discussing candidates for the executive director position.
I
Thank you,
second.
Dr. Thank you, Dr. Robinson. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, let's do a roll call vote. Aye. Dr. Robinson?
Yes.
Tom?
Aye.
Jenna?
Aye.
Arlene?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Xiaorui?
Hi.
And Donna?
Aye.
All right, motion carries unanimously. We will be moving into an executive session.
Give me 1 second to make that work.
Thank you, Melanie. Melanie is working some magic
Yes,
tonight with
thank you,
multiple, multiple computers.
Yes.
And by the way, Adam and Sean, you guys are dismissed for the evening. You guys aren't needed for this session. So thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
guys.
Night,
Have a good
everyone.
night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Bottom of my screen, I think that is all of us. At this point, I believe I'm just looking for a motion to adjourn. And remember, once we adjourn the meeting, we're just going to stay on for scheduling purposes to discuss scheduling amongst ourselves. Donna,
I move to adjourn.
is there a second?
I second.
Tom, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Are we good with that one?
Now that we're done, Brigitte and I took a course on Robert's rules, and they
One
said
second,
you-
one second, so I can